Let's now bring in Behnam Taleblu, who is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies, joining us from Washington, D.C. Behnam, firstly, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on. Tell me, out of tens of candidates in these elections, the Guardian Council practically barred everyone but the hardliners. How much value does this vote really have for the people there?
Well, great to be with you, Sarah. It's typical for the Guardian Council to unfortunately engage in these mass disqualifications that you spoke of in this round of Iran's quote-unquote elections, because in reality, there really is only one important voter, and that's Iran's supreme leader, who the Guardian Council is actually loyal to. In this case, there were 592 candidates that the Guardian Council was supposed to vet. The spokesperson of the Guardian Council said they only seriously considered about 40 of them. And of that 40, you have 5 of which are really devoted ultra hardliners, as you've mentioned here. So whoever wins among these folks, it's the Iranian people, most unfortunately, that lose.
Yeah, and Behnam, we know that Iran is really suffering the worst economic crisis since the 1979 revolution, worsened, of course, by sanctions and the pandemic. What is a way out of this, if any?
Well, there are some long-standing structural issues in Iran's banking sector and financial sector. Of course, it doesn't help that you have lots of major financial institutions tied or owned to or controlled by the notorious Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The Islamic Republic has spent 42 years making it look like the country is not a good place for foreign direct investment, is not a good place for capital, is not a good place for business. But ultimately, if these folks, if these politicians, and in particular Iran's supreme leader, did care about the economy over their revolutionary ideology, they would open up, they would negotiate in good faith, they would have the IAEA come in and really inspect all these sites. But the real truth of the matter is that they do have something to hide. And in fact, they do put revolutionary ideology over national interest and economic expediency. And the proof, sadly, is in the pudding.
Yeah, and this, of course, as these negotiations are continuing in Vienna, what line can we expect this new leadership to take with the JCPOA?
I think it's something important for watchers wherever they are in the world to know is whether there's alleged reformists or quote-unquote moderates or conservative pragmatists or hardliners at the helm of the presidency. On paper, that's the country's second most important position. The first is, of course, the supreme leader, and it's the supreme leader that sets the red lines and guidelines for any nuclear negotiation. So advice to the U.S. negotiating team, be cognizant of what happens with the quote-unquote presidential election or selection on June 18th, but ultimately keep your eyes on the prize and don't make it look like you're too eager for sanctions to be lifted. Because one thing that is helping Khamenei move the system further to the right is that he doesn't even need to engage in a fig leaf of moderation anymore, because he believes sanctions relief is coming.
Yeah, so taking all of this into account, tell me, what can Israel expect from Iran in the next few months?
I think something that Israel can expect is for Iran to remain on this revolutionary path. Khamenei, who is Iran's supreme leader, he's in the 8th decade of his life, the 3rd decade of his career, does not appear intent on making any changes anytime soon. Iran over the past decade has felt increasingly comfortable with graduated escalation against U.S. allies in the region, such as Israel, such as Saudi Arabia, such as other GCC states. So I think there's likely going to be more of this tit for tat in the region and more of this regional pushback, especially if you have an ultra hardliner at the helm.
Yeah. All right. Behnam, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.